Right, well, I'd like to now do a video. I haven't done a video for a while, been very busy with other stuff, so I'm sorry for anyone out there who's been missing the free videos I've put on YouTube and my site. Now the video I thought I'd do is going back to the Hastings tournament of this year. I was awarded the best game prize, along with my opponent actually, Samuel Franklin, for my victory with the black pieces in a very interesting Sicilian. So I thought this game is well worth looking at because it was extremely exciting and there was some crazy tactics going on here. Now Sam Franklin I actually lost to a couple of years previously at the Hastings tournament, so I was quite out for revenge. And Sam is very underrated. He's only 2200 strength, but he clearly plays well above that level, especially in sharp theoretical positions. So maybe it was a bit of a mistake to take him on in a main line, but I really wanted to have a brave fight in this game and try to get an interesting position. So let's jump into the game anyway. So it started with a Sicilian, and here I decided to play e6 for the first time in a competitive international event. The idea is I want to get a Najdorf, but I want to avoid the bishop g5 lines. So I'm going to play knight f6 at some point, and maybe I even avoid playing knight f6 and just play b5. So it's kind of a bit like a Dragadorf if you've seen my Dragon DVD 2, but obviously I haven't played g6, I played e6. So in general I want to do the same sort of thing. I want to go pawn here, knight here, and bishop b7 and try to get counterplay on the queen side. So I actually think this is a very interesting, underrated opening, this way of playing, and there's not a lot of fear on it, so I think it's worth investigating quite a lot deeper. My opponent played one of the most theoretical lines, so I continued with my plan, and now I just transposed into a Najdorf for knight to f6. I think bishop to b7, well actually I say I haven't played this in an international game. Well, I lie, I did play this against Jack Rudd, and I lost a horrible game after some position where he played a4 at the correct moment. So I think knight to f6 is right. And now we get a main line Najdorf. I won't spend too much time on the opening because it gets very exciting later on. b4 is another option here, which is very theoretical, but I thought I'd just develop my pieces. My opponent attacks on the king side. I bring my pieces around to the queen side. Knight takes e6 as a threat here, when my knight would be on pre, so I bring my knight around to defend the b6 knight. And now bishop to d3, rook to c8, so I'm preparing to capture the knight on c3 here, which will give me typical counterplay. My opponent avoids that by playing knight on c to e2, so I no longer have that option available. I decided to get my last pieces developed, castle kingside. Obviously quite risky, but I need to castle at some point to get my attack going. g5, and now I had a long think here, and I thought I needed to excuse me, I need to create some counterplay, so I played knight to a4. Now bishop takes g5 may be possible, but I didn't like the fact that white would have the first chance to attack me after something like rook to g1, and there's pressure against my g7 square. So knight to a4, h4, so we're both continuing with our plans, bring another piece around, maybe some sack on b2 could come in. My opponent defends against that. I played b4, some ideas maybe going knight c3 at some point. My opponent just continues attacking, so it's really a race situation. And now, okay, I broke out, and now e5. And this is a critical moment here where I probably had one of the longest thinks of the game, because if I don't do anything in this position, let's say I play something like a5, which looks like a normal move, trying to put my bishop on a6, well, I think my opponent gets an overwhelming position with a simple plan of f4, bishop a6, and then just f5. And, well, it's clear I'm the one on the defensive here. So I have to play quite actively here in order to get counterplay, and it kind of always looks like I'm slightly behind in my counterplay, but I just about managed to drum up enough stuff to keep the game interesting. So I went bishop queen to b6, knight c3 might be an idea, but bishop c5 is, and now bishop c5 is played, rook c1. Now given a chance, my opponent might even take on c5 here and then play knight to b3 in some positions, so I have to try to open up his queen side. So I managed to get some kind of play in this position, but I'm still not entirely confident about my position here, as well, my knight on a4 looks quite dangerous, but the bishop on d4 really dominates this piece. This knight on a4 is dominated by the bishop, and my opponent still has this plan of just attacking me, so I have to generate quite quickly here. And again, I had a long think here, because a5 would be the logical move, the idea again of going bishop a6, but I was very concerned about my opponent just capturing on c8 and then just swapping pieces off. For example, after this position here, I thought I had a, well, horrible position, because my knight on a4 is, again, dominated. I have problems with the back rank, and my opponent could just aim to swap the queens off, queen c2, when I can only be worse, but I have no winning chances at all. So I didn't like this idea, so I've had a long think, and I came up with a good plan here, I believe. I kept the pieces on the board by playing bishop to c6, with some idea of going rook to b8 at some point, but at least stopping some exchanges on the c file. So now knight to e2 was played, which is a good move. This knight comes around to a better square. Bishop to b5, knight to f4. My opponent could have taken on c8 here, but I was going to trap in my queen, but I was going to sack the exchange with rook takes c1 and bishop takes d3, which I thought should offer me good play in this position. So my opponent decided to keep the initiative with knight to f4, good place for the knight, and now rook to b8. So this is the point behind my play. I want to generate play on the b file and maybe get my rook to b4 later on. And now it's really a race. Well, rook to c7, very logical. a5. My plan now is to go bishop to a6 and rook to b4. So again, a race. h5. Looks a bit scary. Bishop a6, g6, and now rook takes b4. Well, it's really a fingers crossed job here. I mean, I have to play in this manner. I have no choice. h6, another very good move with a fascinating position here. And the problem was this has moved 31, and we're both getting very short on time here. So anything is possible in this position. I mean, it looks like White's attack should be a lot stronger than mine. I mean, I can't take on d4 now. This would lead to checkmate after something like taking on h7, and now taking on g7 and queen g2 checkmate. So I haven't got time to play this move. I have to really do something about my king here. So I'm forced to take on g6 with my pawn. And, well, my opponent took on g7 with his pawn, which is the only move I can consider. Malcolm Payne actually pointed out in his Daily Telegraph column that he has a strong idea here, which only a computer would find. Rook takes g7 check, and then rook to c1. And unbelievably, this idea seems to win for White. But of course, in positions like this, when the position is crazy, it's very hard to find such a move. The idea is to take on h7 and then go rook to c7 check. We both completely missed this idea. It doesn't look like I've got a defence. I mean, let's, for example, play rook to b8, and he just continues with this brilliant idea of sacrificing h7 and going rook to c7 check, and it's going to be mate after something like king h8 and rook g7 mate. So this is the one chance my opponent missed in this game. Instead he took on g7, and now I have prepared rook takes f4, and this gives me some chance of capturing on d3 with an attack. My opponent can't take on f4 because I prepared knight to c3, crash, bang, wallop. And this actually wins the game, this lovely move of knight to c3 check, which is a distracting move to try to get to the b2 pawn. Obviously my opponent has to take the bishop, but now it's mate after bishop to d3 check, king to a1, and then rook to a4 mate. Of course, very complicated position. If you want to spend a bit more time on it, you're more than welcome. I'm not going to spend too much time because I'm going to run out of video space, so I'm going to try to plough through. But that was my idea. After queen takes f4, this knight to c3 check. But my opponent played another, well, the best move in this position. Rook takes h7, a blow for a blow. And, well, the point behind this is if I take on h7, he goes queen to h2 check, and then queen to h8 will be mate. So a fascinating position after rook to h7 where we're both attacking each other, and now I have to come up with a very good plan, otherwise I'm just going to lose to rook h8 checkmate. Very short on time, very nervous we both were here, but I had just about calculated a winning idea. Queen to d3 check, and now my opponent has to go king to a1. Unbelievable. If the queens come off, then I can capture his rook after something like queen takes queen, and then I can just take this rook, and he no longer has queen to h2 check, but he just goes king to a1. Bonkers position. Now I can't take on d2 because of rook to h8 checkmate. But after king to a1, I have to keep checking. It's forced. I have to play aggressive chess here, otherwise I'm just going to lose. So queen to f1 check. And now my opponent played king to a2, which leads to checkmate by force. I'd expected him to play rook to c1, when just for the crowd, which was rapidly building around the board, okay, I saw I could play rook takes d4 here, which should win. But just for the crowd, I was intending to play the kind of magical move here, in a very sensible position, knight to c3. And this kind of looked appropriate for the game, to be honest. If he checks on h8, let's have a look what happens if he tries to attack me first. I was just going to take on g7. That doesn't help him. If he takes my queen on f1, well, then I have rook to a4 mate. If after knight to c3, if he takes the knight, it looks correct to take it with the pawn. I think everything else is fairly straightforward for me. For example, he takes the queen. I expect I can go rook to a4, and then bishop to d3, which should be winning. So if he takes the pawn, he's now opened up the b file, and I can win with the sequence rook check, and then queen check, and after king c2, rook to a2 check, winning the queen with check. So I was a bit disappointed, actually, my opponent didn't play rook to c1 here, because I think that would have been a very nice blow, knight to c3, a really beautiful position. Instead, my opponent played king to a2. Okay, this still leads to a very nice checkmate. I had to play everything with check, otherwise my opponent wins. But I have bishop c4 check, b3, and now I need to vacate the a4 square for my rook, otherwise I'm going to lose. So knight to c3 check, king b2 runs into queen to b1, leading to mate. So my opponent has to play bishop takes c3, and now rook to a4 check. And we quickly go to checkmate after queen a1 and rook to a2, and checkmate is going to follow. So, well, a very interesting game, and I think it's a very good contender for best game prize, and indeed it was awarded to us. I mean, it's quite unusual for both players to split the best game prize if one player wins, but I think Sam Franklin was very due his share of the best game. This game would not be possible without both sides really going for it, and it was clear he showed no fear in this game. And you can just see the talent he has with moves like rook takes h7. Could have really gone either way as well, so very interesting game. So anyway, that was the best game prize from Hastings this year. I think in the last 5 years or something I've managed to win it 3 times, so quite a good record. And maybe I'll show some other games from Hastings at a later point. But stay tuned anyway. I'll try to put a post up in future on some of the games from the Bunratty Congress, which were, well, let's say fascinating, but maybe under the influence of a little bit too much Guinness. So hope you enjoyed that video. Please leave comments, and I will get back to you soon. Cheers, goodbye.